Yo, what's up, Sci fam? Sci fam. Sci fam, what's up? It's your boy, Nickel, and I'm going to teach you today the difference between habits and addictions. So, title your page, Habits versus Addictions. You can see we can fit all of this on one page. We're going to talk about the reward pathway, the difference between healthy habits and addictions, and how it relates to the teenage brain. Of course. Okay, let's get started. Habits versus addictions. So the first thing that we're going to identify is that the reward pathway this pathway in your brain is activated anytime you experience any type of pleasure. So the reward pathway is basically your body creating connections between neurons with myelin. So it's like white matter is laid down, and it creates these pathways. And when you experience pleasure, we call that a reward pathway. And things that might cause you to feel pleasure is, maybe something on social media. You get a Snapchat from a friend, and you feel good. Well, that activates your reward pathway. Or even different types of food causes you to feel pleasure. Exercise can cause pleasure. A lot of people have that runner's high, or they feel good after they lift weights and they feel amped up, or maybe sports can cause pleasure as well. So let's add sports on here because that's a little different than exercise, because that's like accomplishing a challenge, or even different social situations can cause pleasure. And those can be things like maybe you make a new friend, or maybe you trip your brother or sister and you're like, haha, gotcha. And that also activates your reward pathway because you feel pleasure from it. And it also relates to the last one, which is power. Some people, maybe you become captain of a sports team or captain of the chess club, and you have this new power and authority and you feel pleasure from that. Or maybe you get someone to do something that maybe they shouldn't have, and you have power over them, and that causes you to have pleasure. It might not be the best type of power, but it still causes pleasure. So we're going to add that in there. So that reward pathway that we were just talking about, this releases in your brain a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And if you remember, this was the pleasure neurotransmitter. So when I say before that anytime you experience pleasure, the reward pathway is activated, well, what's happening is your body is actually releasing dopamine, a neurotransmitter, which is going to cause your repeat behaviors. You're going to want to do it again because it felt good. You get pleasure from it, and so you're going to want to reactivate that reward pathway, release more dopamine. That's why a lot of people check their social media all the time, is because they get pleasure from it once or twice and they want more of that. And so they constantly keep checking it over and over and over and over again, and they might become addicted to their social media. Well, the difference between a habit and an addiction is pretty subtle. So a healthy habit, the reward pathway that we were just discussing, is activated. In an addiction, the reward pathway is activated. So in both of these, whether it's a habit or an addiction, you're still activating the reward pathway, which is releasing dopamine in your brain. But the reason we have two different words for basically the same thing is that a healthy habit is activated by things that we consider to be positive behaviors, like exercise. Exercise would be called a healthy habit. In addiction, the reward pathway is activated by destructive behaviors. So like nicotine, when people vape and they get nicotine in their body, that nicotine is not going to be helpful for your body. The vape itself can actually cause chemical burns to your lungs, which are also destructive to your body. So we would call that an addiction. You're now addicted to something. It's not a healthy habit. All right, well, let's dig into this a little bit more. One thing that we know for sure, it's not new, it's not in the 2020s, it's not in the 2000s, it's not in the 1990s, but always the teen brain has always craved stimulation. So I'm going to draw a little lightning bolt here. Because the teen brain, when you're a teenager, you're always looking to be stimulated. But something that's different in current times and that we see currently in teenagers is that we're actually seeing increasing rates of depression and anxiety. And this is new. This is just in the last 10 or 20 years. And that's because of our, what we would say is our current climate. And I don't mean like our CO2 in our atmosphere climate. I'm talking about other things that are happening in our society that are causing depression and anxiety because the way that teens are choosing to be stimulated, or maybe it's not that the teens are choosing it, but society is creating situations that are increasing depression and anxiety. And this current climate that I'm discussing are things like the fact that right now, if you're a teenager, you're going through puberty at a time when social media is transforming our society. That's something new that we haven't quite figured out all of the ins and outs with. And so going through puberty and having social media, that can be really, really dangerous, because as you're looking for that stimulation, social media might not be the most healthy or positive behavior, which can cause that stimulation. And so it can actually lead you down some dark, depressive, and anxious roads. Another thing, other than the fact that you're going through puberty at a time when social media is transforming our society, another thing are the fact that we have economic and national insecurities right now. And these economic and national insecurities, these are things that, some people could argue that these are always present. But more specifically right now, there's a lot of worries about college and whether or not you can pay for college or even get into college. Terrorism is something that is more common now than it has been in the past, or at least people are talking about it more now. School shootings are definitely something that are in the news a lot and are more of a current climate thing than it's not something that really happened in the past. And then the last thing is just developing a personal identity, which is compounded by YouTube and other social media platforms, because everyone's looking to find their own personal identity. So, this current climate is causing more depression and anxiety because teens are looking for stimulation within this climate. And so it's just important to know that when you make decisions, that we're doing our best to decide to do something that's positive over something that is destructive. So down here at the bottom of our page, we're going to add one last thing here about depression and anxiety. So let's say depression, anxiety, and disconnection. If you're not feeling connected to those around you, contribute to addictions. So when you're not feeling good about yourself, then usually people will do something that maybe is more of a destructive type of behavior. And so if we can reduce depression and anxiety and disconnection, then hopefully we can reduce the number of addictive behaviors that people do. And teens are more prone to these because you're craving that stimulation. So in order to overcome addictions, or in order to overcome depression, anxiety, and disconnection and avoid addictions, one thing that is really helpful is human connection. Like if you have friends that you feel supported by, and family that you feel supported by, or teachers, or other peers, or adults, or coaches, or friends, whatever it might be, connecting with other people helps us do more positive behaviors and less of those destructive behaviors. Also, healthy habits So positive behaviors, if you can replace your addictive behaviors with healthy habits to replace addictive behaviors, or we can call that destructive, because things that are addictive means that we have destruction or destructive tendencies. So in order to overcome those addictions, having more human connection and choosing healthy habits instead of those destructive behaviors is going to be beneficial. Well, I hope you can think about your life and identify some healthy habits that you have. And if you can also identify some addictions you may have, then it's time to start thinking about what are some healthy habits that you can replace with those addictions that you might have. I'll catch you on the next one. Be good out there. Make smart decisions. Adios.